Sir, can I start? Good noon, everyone. Today's presentation on comparative and translation study. On this day, me, Rajeshwari, and Wrinkle, three have going to present on the first chapter of citing translation, history, post-structuralism, and the colonial context by Tejaswini Niranjana. Here is the academic information of table of content which we are going to present. About the writer, Tejaswini Niranjana is born 26 July 1958. She is an Indian professor, cultural theorist, translator, and author. Tejaswini Niranjana is a professor of cultural studies at Lingnan University, Hong Kong. She was formerly at the Center for the Study of Culture and Society, Bangalore, which she co-founded. Uh, she is best known for her contribution to the fields of culture studies, gender studies, translation, and the ethnomusicology, particularly relating to the different forms of Indian music. She is the recipient of the 2018 Humanities and Social Science prestigious fellowship research grant council, Hong Kong. Niranjana was always also awarded the Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award for the best translation of 1994. Niranjana is best known for her theory of the relationship between colonialism and translation, writing on feminism and the culture question in India, and her practice-based research into music, specifically Caribbean music, Hindustani classical music, and India-China collaboration. Here is the abstract of article. In a post-colonial context, the problematic of translation becomes a significant site for raising questions of representation, power, and history. Niranjana contends that simultaneously translation in the colonial context produce and supports a conceptual economy that works into the discourse of Western philosophy to function as a philosophy, fixing colonized cultures, making them seem static and changing rather than historically constructed. Her concern here is to explore the place of translation in contemporary Euro-American literary theory through a set of interrelated reading. She argues that the deployment of translation in colonial context show us a way of questioning some of the theoretical emphasis of post-structuralism, shows how they brings translation and its relevance to the post-colonial situation into being hegemonic versions of no Western other. The practice of power and knowledge is brought into being within multiple discourse and on multiple sites. One such site is a transaction. The argument presented underscores the obscure violence inherent in constructing the colonial subject, emphasizing the hegemonic versions of the non-Western other rooted in powerful metaphysics of translation. Uh, perpetuate distorted portrayals. These representation legitimized through English education in formerly colonized religion became ingrained as a natural and real, reinforcing ruling class power. To challenge these distorted depictions, a critical examination of the historicist tenets endorsing them is imperative. Here is a key point. On first chapter, situating translation, colonial discourses employs translation to construct dominant representations of colonized subject. These presentations are seen as truthful and circulate through philosophical, historical, and literary discourses. Translation participates in constructing a hierarchical model of cultures that justify imperial conquest. It also fixes colonized culture as a static rather than recognizing their historicity. The notion of the colonial subject as a living in translation requires examining translation's role in subjectification, questioning the notion of representation. In second chapter, translation as interpellation, influential 18th and 19th century British translators like William Jones and James Mill constructed enduring Orientalist representation of the Hindu. Their translation presented the colonized as deceitful, effeminate, impervious to reason, the unfit for self-governance. Translation of laws just suggested they preclude political liberty, justifying continued British rule. English education introduced after 1835 perpetuated colonial discourse, providing access to Orientalist translation rather than indigenous text. In third chapter, the question of history, post-colonial theory is a skeptical of technological historicism and its denial of covalence. It seeks to challenge colonial representation without invoking a false notion of recovering an undamaged pre-colonial essence. The concept of hybridity reveals the ambivalence and instability underlying imperial claims to dominate. Post-colonial approaches try to rewrite history and recover occult voices without essentially. Translation contains radical potential as a affirmative disruptive practice, challenging the colonial discourse, its role in past and present. Asymmetries of power must be integrated for translation to be decolonizing. Key concepts: uh, domestication versus foreignization, balancing faithfulness versus readability, loss and gain in translation, and untranslatable nouns and creative adaptations, power dynamics in language choice, imposing versus embracing diversity. Translation as resistance, subverting colonial narrative and reclaiming agency. For further information, I would like to call Rajeshwari.
So I will deal with another part of this presentation. So this is the key arguments, and on the base of information, I have rephrased these arguments in OpenAI and making it in bullet points. So, colonial translation shaped enduring Orientalist view. Translation contributed to a hierarchical model justifying imperial rule. English education reinforced in colonial discourses. the concept of hybridity, post-colonial approaches. Translation is a radical, disruptive practice challenging colonial discourse, and these are the key points that is the discussed by Tejas Vini Niranjana in this chapter. So, analysis of arguments. Here are some key arguments made by the writer Niranjana in the article. So, translation as an interpretation. This is the second main point in her article. The most significant notes of John's work are here. The John's means William John's. The need for translation by the European, since the native are unreliable interpreters of their own laws and culture. So here, William John criticized the work, that is, if those who are native, they are very prejudiced towards their work, and they are when they are giving the argument according to their work, so maybe there is prejudices, natural prejudices is shown in there. So he was argued in the work, and he says the Hinduism is the religion where the people are submissive, and this how he was criticized. So there is a two way to see the translation of William Jones. One is the inspiring. William Jones' work, the translation of Shakuntala, that is originally written by Kalidas. So this work is a very highly remarkable work in a European culture, and it is people are very influenced by this translation, and this how the language Sanskrit language is introduced in the European culture. So this is one view where the people are inspired by his work, and the second one is the way he was criticized the matters. The desire to be a lawgiver, to give the Indians their own laws. So and those who are in the hierarchy, as we have seen, India is divided in the caste system, and those who are in hierarchy, they think we are the lawgivers, and they are deciding the laws. These caste peoples are done this work, and this is by the other people. In the same way, if the outsiders are come there and they says now we are fixing the laws, so the idea is the same. Now only those who are in power are just changed. The desire of purity, Indian culture, and speak on its behalf. uh, when he was in the court at that time, John's tell about the Hinduism in the Pandits, and in the Muslim there is a Molvis are the both are the problematic, and that's why he was learning Sanskrit language and try to define the what is really written in this language. So the concept of purity is the same problematic if there are the insiders who are deciding the idea of purity, or the another people, those who are coming from the another country. So ultimately the concept of purity is the as problematic as the same way. Stuart Mill's History of British India, the Hindu like the Enoch exclaves the qualities of a slave. So this is the another major figure. Mill was also trying to say about translation of Indian works. Charles Trevelyan wrote how the influence of the indigenous elite would secure the performances of a change wrought by Western education. In the very starting page, Niranjana starting uh, this work with this example of this trans-Trevelyan's diaries concept, where Charles says about the Indian people, those the Indian child are very there is a hunger for the English education. So this Charles was writing in a good manner and wants to says the people are ready to learn, but here the Tejaswini Niranjana puts in a negative manner. If in the context of colonialism, if it is good to hunger for education, but here is the hunger for English education. So this how this, in the context of colonialism and the post-colonial argument, Tejaswini Niranjana says this is not as good as we are seeing. If nowadays we are saying the same way, the people are very hungry for the government job and the high marks, so they we cannot not see the now the quality of education is increased, but the education is increased for the job purpose, not the purpose of knowledge itself. And Antonio Gramsci's the concept of hegemony is also discussed in this work. The hegemony, that means the rule by concern, and the people, those who are ruled by the concern, that means the same way. If at that time the people are ruling, Britishers are ruling over the India, and this said. So in after the independence, the those who are in the government, they are also ruling over their in the in the country with their concern. That means hegemony is the rule by concern in a both way. So further continue, I'm continuing. Colonial translation by figures like William Jones and James Mills constructed enduring Orientalist representation of colonized subject as deceitful ammunition. As I have said in early slide, there's the William Jones and James Mills work of that Shakuntala and Dharmashastra by Manu. It's translated, and with the help of this work, the European people are introduced the Indian knowledge system and the Sanskrit language, and they are also inspired by those translations. Translation participated in creating a teleological hierarchical model of culture that justified imperial rule. The introduction of English education perspective or colonial discourse by providing access to Orientalist translations rather than indigenous text. Post-colonial theory is skeptical of teleological historicism and its denial of historicity of to colonized peoples, and the notion of the hybridity. In the translation, there is the hybridity is seen if the one language is translated to the in by the another one, so their culture and their idea is also emerging with this work. So by the in translating, the hybridity is also shown and the cultures are emerging in the works. Post-colonial approaches aim to rewrite history and recover accumulated voices without skipping essential. So, translation contains radical potential as affirmative, disruptive practice, challenging colonial discourse. Here, Tejaswini Niranjana is trying to say that when the people, when the others are translating, there may be those who are in power. So the white people are in power, and when they are ruled over the other country, there may be the some selfish motives are there. But if in the same way we can say, the in a country, if the own people in the democracy, the politicians, when they are ruled, there are some their selfishness. So it is the same way the psyche of the people are working in that manner. Its role in past and present asymmetrics of power needs iterations for it to play decolonizing role. So this is the thing that the where we are the power, but in a broader concept, we can say after the globalization happening in 1991, at that before that the people are not very widespread throughout the uh, world, but after this globalization, the Indian peoples are also spread throughout the world, and not only they are now as a submissive person or becoming as a slave, but After that time, the people are getting very good job opportunity in multinational companies. Also, they are becoming the prime minister of the countries. So this can be the seen as the new aspect of this post colonial argument. The epistemological assumptions of translation must be questioned for its resist rather than perpetuate colonial subjugation. So, here, according to Derrida, the things is also questioned. So, this, as we seen, this work is written in 1992, and we can say so those things are only the written. So we have to question, because when the another person who is translating the work, they are not remotely situated the place when the original writer or author is situated. And so there is some we can say some geographical limitations is also shown there. So because of that, there is maybe some uh, cultural idea of culture. The translator may not know what is the culture of that particular region. So there is we always we have to question the translation. And Niranjana argues that colonial translation constructed enduring Orientalist representation that were conflicts with imperial rule. She calls for rethinking translation to recover plural voices and challenges hegemonic colonial discourses. For further, I would like to call my co-presenter Wrinkle.
Hello everyone, I am Wrinkle, and as Riti and Rajeshwari have as Rajeshwari and Riddhi have dealt with these topics, like situating translation in a particular post-colonial and post-structuralist aspects, like how translation gets situated into these arguments, like metaphysics of presence of Derridian concept is here used. Like if here uh, the metaphysics of present, like the diary of Trevelyan is used there, like how the person who is translating Sanskrit text like Abhigyan Shankutalam and Manusmruti, but what is he doing further? Like he is not trusting Indian Maulvis and Pandits and writing about this Indian people. And what was the motive here is something different than the very noble work of translating and influencing the West from the Indian culture and text, like from Sanskrit language. Now, for onwards, like here, the critical role of hybridity in both the subaltern critique of historiography and the revolution of traditional notions of translation. The author contends the understanding hybridity as living in translation should extend beyond the focus on post-colonial elites, recognizing its pervasive impact across the boundaries shaped by colonial and neo-colonial domination. So, Gauri Vishwanathan in this article has pointed out something like East India Company, English Parliament, between Parliament and missionaries, between the East India Company and the native elite classes. Like hegemony was working not only throughout the missionaries and companies, but also Indian elites were highly involved within the process. And to extending her argument, Niranjana here is suggesting that specific resolution uh, of the language English, uh, it would provide the educated Indian with a whole range of Orientalist images. Uh, Even the capitalizing history, the major concept of history is concerned there, like how capitalizing history is situated there. Uh, Niranjana takes historicity to mean, although non problematically effective history, or that part of the past that's still operative and in the that is still operative in the present. The past which is still operative in the present. The complexity and ambiguity associated with the hybridity are acknowledged, emphasizing its historical implications. The author rejects a simplistic narrative of global homogenization, advocating instead for the reinvention of opposition cultures and non centralizing ways. Ultimately, hybridity is the portrayed as a cornerstone in post-colonial theory, challenging essentialist reading models and pointing towards a transformative approach to translation practices. Here are several questions. Why open translation and how it manifests effective history? Post-colonial theory can show that we need to translate history rather than to interpret it. So, history by the post-colonial aspects, Niranjana has pointed out that we need to translate history rather than in the process of translating by colonial people is getting interpreted rather than the process of translating, which gets differ here. The question of hybrid will inform our reading. The Niranjana here argues like the question of his hybridity is always informative for reading, and colonial hybridity is not a problem of cultural identity that can be resolved by relativistic approach. It is rather a problematic of colonial representation and individual individuation that reverses the effects of colonial dissolval. And the knowledges enter upon dominant discourses and estrange the basis of its authority. Okay. Towards the conclusion part, by delving into Niranjana's insights, learners gain awareness of historical challenges. It's crucial to note that Niranjana doesn't assert her study as a solution to translators' dilemmas or proposes a foolproof method for bridging cultural gaps. Instead, the focus lies on contemplating the gap itself, probing the absence of awareness regarding asymmetry and historicity in discussions on translation. This approach encourages a thoughtful examination of the complexities inherent in translation, emphasizing the need to address these issues rather than proving simplistic solutions. The conclusion of citing translation, post-structuralism, and the colonial context likely summarizes the key findings and insights regarding translation within historical, post-structuralism, and colonial frameworks. It may highlight the interconnection connectedness of these elements and implications for the understanding translation in diverse cultural contexts. Like Niranjana is arguing towards the very crucial points. Like she is not giving any solution, but how if in colonial time the history as in further this slide I have discussed the translation is here merely to be it is not the past but something going happening in present also. Like translation will be continuing, right? So it has to be with those implications. And as here all the Edward Said's Orientalism, Charles Trevelyan's colonized uplift, Derrida's obviously deconstruction theories, and translation and history linked by Benjamin. This Niranjana has interwoven all the concepts to prove her points and to making her points clear. Yeah, this is our reference. Thank you. Uh,
Wrinkle, my question is why is it significant to question the notion of representation in the context of post-colonial translation?
Okay. The significant to question the notion of representation in the colonial uh, and context of post-colonial translation, like the representation which here gets generated, like how the one notion of presenting something, like representing any identity or the representing someone or speaking on someone's behalf, like translation is something like speaking on behalf of someone. If I am Indian and someone is if I am speaking another language which the person didn't get, so I will definitely narrate in my own way. That is how representations are made from on behalf of someone else. So that is why questioning something is really very crucial in the part of translation. So yeah, that is it.
So, Rajesh Kriba, my question is, how do contemporary discussion use Tejaswi Niranjana's post-colonial?
Okay, Drashti. So the argument by Tejaswani Niranjana is helps us to decide thinking about the power dynamic, cultural differentiations, and the translation and re-questioning the translations of the all. And if we are seeing in the contemporary post-colonial argument, so we can say by the example of waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, there is a two character Pozzo and Lucky represents of the people are now they have if we in the context of this work, people and the other those who are now not in the ruled by the power structure, but still they are live in the same chains in the power structure. So we can view these things in a post-colonial contemporary context. Thank you.
Ritin, my question is, how does Tejaswini Niranjana's sitting translation enhance our grasp of translations or intricate dynamics and its impact on cultural context?
Citing translation by Tejaswani Niranjana, it depends on our understanding of translation complexities and their influence on cultural context, light on the nuanced nature of the translation process.